So let's now convert this component, login.view, from the Options API to the Composition API. And this is relatively straightforward. And the reason I'm including this one is because it actually has child components and it includes a form, but it's really straightforward. So same as before, in the components folder, I'll create a new file and I'll call this one login composition. I'm sure you guessed I would, .vue. And I'll go back to login.view and I'll copy the template section, which is probably not going to change very much, if at all. Do we use the word this in here anywhere? No, we do not. So that's simple. And let's go back and see if it has a style component. I can't remember. No, it doesn't. So now we can go back to our login composition.view file and we can start with the script statement. So script, try that again, script, and I don't want to use any predetermined solutions, /script. And I have to import, not surprisingly, ref and onMounted. I'm going to import those from view. I'm also going to have to import text input. Let's just go copy the input parts from over here and save some typing. So I want text input. I'll copy that one. And I'm going to use store2. So I'll copy them all, then delete the router one. That's simple enough. I want form tag. So copy all of those and paste them in here. I think that's all my imports. Okay, so router can probably stay the same. We'll find out momentarily. Next, I will export default and give it a name. And I'll call this one login composition. And I'll also give it some props and make them empty because I need the context. And it emits potentially an error. And I'm also going to specify the components. Now I don't have to do this. I could just use the component names as they exist, uppercase F, uppercase T, but I like to use the lowercase syntax with the hyphens. So I'll just do that this way. So I'm going to call the first one form-tag, and it points to form tag. And I'm going to use text-input, and that points to text input. Okay, so there's my components, then a comma. And now my setup with props, which is ignored, and context, which is not, and give ourselves some room. So let's set up our state. And the only things we worry about at this point are mail, which is the username, equal to ref, an empty string. That's what it starts as. And password. Let password equal ref, and it starts as an empty string as well. And now I'll have my onMounted function, which I'm actually not going to use, but it's here for just this purpose. OnMounted, and use an arrow function. Console.log using new component, just so I know that it's actually using it. Okay? And now, we want a function that is actually going to be called when someone submits this form. And if you recall, that's the submit handler. So let's create a submit handler function. Function submit handler. And it takes no parameters. And what does it do? Well, let's go over to login.view and see what it does here. So submit handler has all of this information. I'm going to copy everything in it right down to here. So copy that. Go back to login composition and then paste it in and see if I have to change anything. So I'm declaring a constant. Well, we can't use this.email. It's email. Did I call it email? Well, what did I call it? Mail. Mail.value. And password is password.value. I'm leaving the value in there. I'm not sure that I have to, but I'm going to put them in there right now. Then we come all the way down here. We can't use this $emit in this part. Instead, that becomes ctx.emit. Store.token stays the same. All of this stays exactly the same. And we're storing the information to the cookie. And then we have router push. And that's why, of course, why we imported router up here. We're just using the push function of the router object, and that still stays exactly the same. So after all of that, after this function, and make sure you get in the right spot, you want to be after the closing tag for the function. We just return, using our curly brackets. We need to return submit handler, or we don't have access to it. And the same thing for mail and password. Okay, now let's go over to our index.js, find where the login component is, and change that to login composition. And copy this and paste it here. Then find login down here and paste it there and paste it there. Open our terminal, stop the application because I'm changing the router, start it again. And I'll go back to my web browser. And I'll open the JavaScript console, clear the console, and I'll go to the login screen. I'll go home first, and I'll just reload because I'm not an optimist. And now I'll go to the login screen and watch the console. Using new component. Now, a warning. Property email was accessed during render but is not defined on instance. Let's see what we got wrong. So, back in login composition.view, I'm calling mail.value. So mail, password. And it must be in the form up here. vModel is mail. Okay, let's see if we have any other warnings. We'll go back to our web browser, clear the console, and just reload this page. Much better. So I'll close the console and I'll try logging in, see if it works. Put in my correct login credentials, which I have to spell right, or it's not going to log me in properly. That's better. And my password, and let's try logging in. And there we are. And I go to the admin, manage users, I can look at books, everything works as expected. Perfect. So as you can see, the composition API isn't that difficult. It's a slightly different syntax. Everything gets crammed into the setup function, except for like name and props and things like that. But almost everything exists inside of the setup function. And if you want to export methods, you don't declare a methods property. Instead, you just declare them right in the setup function as regular JavaScript functions and then return them. And that's all there is to it. And that should be enough for you to convert as much of your project as you want to from the Options API to the Composition API. All right, let's move on.